Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Blockchain Marketing Insights with me, Yasha Harari. Just want to remind everybody, this is not a financial advice show. I'm not a financial advisor. Do your own research. I talk about marketing and crypto. All right, so you can see the impact here. On CoinMarketCap, we're looking at a market that in theory has a 50.8% Bitcoin dominance, but in reality it's much higher, and a market cap of 182 billion, but in reality it is much lower, right? In theory it's around 5% of that, so make of that what you will. A $9 billion market cap, or sorry, the market cap might be 182, but the volume is probably roughly 5% of what it says. So if it says around 49 billion, that means it's roughly 2.5 billion, right? A little bit less. But for the 2.5 billion, the trading healthy indicators are up and everything else are up, and we're seeing price as well go up for pretty much all of the top 10 coins except for Stellar and Tether. Yes, well, Tether, and even so basically all the top 10 coins other than Stellar, real coins, went up a little. Like once again. We're seeing growth in Bitcoin, we're seeing growth in Ethereum, we're seeing growth in XRP and Litecoin, all across the board. It's not massive, right? EOS stands out with over 5%. It's 6.83% yesterday. But considering where we are compared to a week and a half ago, before that rally led up the price of Bitcoin from 4 to 5K, and Dogecoin before that, and Litecoin as well, and all these other coins started pumping. Prices went up around 20% for Bitcoin and a lot more for other coins, and less for some. But we did see a strong rally, and we are now basically at a new kind of, I don't want to call it a plateau, but a new level for a lot of coins. Some are going up, some are going down. Look at that. The Dogecoin bump is falling down, falling down, falling down. Well, it's Dogecoin. It'll do just fine, I suppose. Qtum up as well. Bitcoin Gold. Seriously. Basic attention token is, look at that. They're going up. Very green day. So no one's complaining, I think, about overall what's going on with their portfolio, unless they wanted to buy at lower prices and they missed out, obviously. But, there's always today, there's always tomorrow, 24/7. This market never sleeps. So you always have an entry point if you're looking to do that. Not, again, something that I really would, I don't recommend entry points or exit points for anyone. I don't talk about that stuff as a investment asset opportunity. I'm looking at it from a marketing perspective, and what I see here, when I see the color green as a marketer, I think, okay, people are buying in. It's a good time to be marketing, right? It's an important time to be marketing. And this is why it's key that we get the right information out there to make sure that we are communicating the right messages to the people that, in theory, could be adopters of cryptocurrencies and blockchains. And one of the things that I'm seeing, this is just part of reality, are memes like this, right? Is fear-mongering good for crypto, right? That's a very good question. Because we are seeing a lot of fear-mongering. We are seeing a lot of FUD, despite the warmth of a lot of media talking about how maybe this is the next bull run and everything else. Some people, particularly people who, let's say, haven't made the best calls of late, and who are hoping for the bottom to not be printed yet, because they are looking to buy bigger bags, although I'm sure they already have a nice sum, but still they have, plans to buy more bags before the price goes back up. Although they're aware that in the big picture, we're still in a fairly low price, but we're still seeing some people who are kind of clinging to the hope that we're going to see $3,000 again if they get that opportunity, or maybe even lower than $3,000, so they get the opportunity to buy Bitcoin on the cheap and other coins as well, right? Once they fall as well, presuming they fall if Bitcoin goes down, right? So, why do I mention that? Well, I happen to see a video by a really great YouTuber, actually. Somebody who has not only a decent-sized following for a YouTuber about crypto, But he makes some really brilliant insight. He gives some really brilliant insights about trading. I mean, it has to be said. Alessio Rastani is one of the most, I guess, well thought of crypto traders talking about trading and insights and things like that on YouTube. A lot of people do follow him. He does get a lot of positive feedback. I don't know if that's a good thing or not in terms of that doesn't speak for his skills. That's just people's opinions. But I, personally think he's good at what he does and makes some really brilliant insights. With that said, I have to say that this video I saw of him, by him, posted I think yesterday. Yeah, yesterday, is all FUD. It's some of the worst I've seen, and it uses the old cliche scapegoats of Israel being a warmongering nation led by, a warmongering prime minister, and that he hopes that, quote unquote, the good people of Israel don't vote Netanyahu back into office. Yes, that was yesterday when Netanyahu was running for a 5th term, and actually he won quite handily. And Alessio was basically interjecting his opinions into the political affairs of Israel, which is fine. Everyone has the right to state their opinions. Why not? It's a free country. It's a free world. Well, it's not really a free world, but it's a free country in America and many other countries, and you can state your opinions freely. And there's no reason not to be able to be critical of another state, of any state, especially one that, like every state, has its fair share of imperfections and can be criticized legitimately. That's totally fair. But to make the case that Israel's leader is a warmonger, that in itself is an act of warmongering. Because if you know anything about the Prime Minister of Israel, okay, despite his rhetoric, despite his bully pulpit mentality, despite his behavior, he actually has greatly improved the quality of life for people in Israel and people in the disputed territories, and as well as he has actually limited the amount of destruction happening in Gaza as a result of the Hamas that run all of the different... I just said a trigger word. This video is going to be outed now, or booted. But yeah, the people who run Gaza, right? They have made a mess of things since Israel left that area. And he has actually stopped multiple attempts at war. I mean, the people who live in Gaza started multiple wars against Israel since Israel left. Now, I don't mean to talk about politics very much in this video, but Alessio has stepped his foot into the political pool, and he has a very wide audience, and I believe that that makes an impact on the marketing of crypto. If you look at the messages and what he wrote, are we closer to another war, etc., etc., he gives you a reason, a whole set of reasons why he believes that basically Israel, right, is the evildoer here trying to start another war. Never mind, right? He actually defends the Revolutionary Guard of Iran, which is a terrorist organization through and through. It doesn't matter if it was just recognized for the first time by the United States or anyone else. The Revolutionary Guard of Iran has been recognized as a terrorist organization by multiple groups and countries in the past and currently. They have been directly responsible for funding, helping train, arming, providing logistics and support, and carrying out operations directly and indirectly that led to the death of many innocent civilians around the world, okay? Iran's Revolutionary Guard is one of the worst offenders of violent crimes, okay? When it comes to an armed, trained organization funded by a nation state, they're absolutely an egregious violator and committer of terrorism. It is 100% correct to list them as such. Despite my own beliefs that the current administration in the White House is not necessarily a great administration, right? I'm not a big fan. I think anyone who has watched any of my caricatures or work about politics would know I'm not a great fan of the current White House administration, and yet I do support their take on this. And why? It's not because I'm a right-wing crazy defender of Israel that never agrees to any criticism of Israel. In fact, I'm a published critic of Israel. And you can see my own work published on the Times of Israel. In fact, 4 years ago, I published this article called Disenchanted, Disenfranchised, Disappointed, right? And this original cartoon that goes along with it. And the cartoon is about the Israeli elections, and it's about the hypocrisy of the elections and how they're really not what I would call democracies in the true sense of the word, right? Because you only vote for parties, not actually people. And in this article, I actually explained why I voted for a party called Ale Yarok, which in Hebrew means green leaf, and why, in fact, I did that. Right? And they're a party known for basically supporting the legalization of cannabis and all of that. And they also, however, have a platform of improving the quality of the ecology, environment, education, healthcare, etc., which are all critical issues for people who live in Israel. Okay, they may not seem as grand as in the U.S. because it's a tiny country in population size comparison, and people always like to focus on the explosive nature of headlines, and that's why Alessio, has probably seen a lot of news, I'm guessing, about how Israel is, some kind of violent country when it comes to its leaders, and has probably, taken the bait from whatever source and for whatever reason. I'm not going to assume his ambitions or his motivations because I just don't do that. I will say, however, that it is not a surprise to me that somebody with roots in Iran would defend Iranian, actions, whether they personally agree with them or not. That's just a nationalism thing, and maybe he feels a little bit of that connection, despite the fact that he's obviously a very patriotic, or whatever, a very free, liberal market, person who clearly is not in favor of evil, right? I don't think Alessio is in favor of evil at all, at all. I think he's a good guy. I just honestly think he's a little misinformed here. And the fact is, that despite the failings of the Israeli political system, which I write about at length here in this article, which you can easily read about on the Times of Israel, and the link is obviously in the description below. It's very clear to me, right, that spreading FUD about what's going on in the Middle East is something that people can easily use as a bludgeon to temporarily hold down the prices of cryptos that they actually want to buy bigger bags of. And I'm not saying that that's the reason he did that, but I bet you there are people who are doing that, and they are spread, because I've seen a bunch of that, and you can easily search for that on YouTube. I just don't want to particularly amplify the visibility of that kind of propaganda, because I think it's very bad for crypto. I think it's very bad for crypto marketing. Right? What I think is good for crypto marketing is when people are honest about their criticisms and they say where they're coming from about it, and they don't try to hide behind charts to make an example in a very scapegoaty, classic anti-Semitic, very virulent anti-Jewish claim that, the Zionist nation wants to make another war. First of all, that is complete rubbish. The Zionist nation, right, Israel, has never really started a war, And you can say, well, in 1967, Israel preemptively attacked its neighbors. Yes, because its neighbors were armed to the teeth and waiting to jump at Israel in a moment of surprise, and surprise, surprise, the Israelis surprised them. That is not starting a war. That is called making a smart defensive aggression, It's a smart offensive tactic. It is doing something to win the war, and they won it in 6 days. You could argue that in 1956, Israel aggressed against Egypt. Well, first of all, Israel aggressed not alone when they took over the Sinai in 1956, and they did so as a response to having the Egyptian nationalist party of Gamal Abdel Nasser attempt to close the Suez Canal. And that was not allowed, and therefore Israel, with the help of France, made sure that it remained open, right? And Britain. And then the U.S. said, no, you must reopen it. And the U.S., essentially gave back the Sinai to the Egyptians as a result. But to say that Israel was the only aggressor is wrong. And again, it was not an aggression of offense. It was an aggression of defense to prevent Egypt from breaking international law, which they had been doing by blocking the Suez Canal. Okay? So let's get that fact straight. Israel is not an aggressor. Israel has not started wars with its neighbors. The only time Israel has ever launched or fired the first bullet is when it saw the attacks on the way. And that does not make you an aggressor to fire the first bullet when you know you're going to be attacked. It just makes you faster to the draw. All right? And I am not a huge fan of the system of politics in Israel. I do not think it is truly democratic. I think there are a lot of failings in it. I write about that at length here. And so you cannot really accuse me of being a defender of the guy who is currently prime minister in Israel and who just won a fifth election. That said, I will not use him as a scapegoat to hold down the price of crypto or blockchain, and I will not use it as a scapegoat to defend poorly studied politics or a misunderstanding of the political situation and the realpolitik that's going on currently that we're seeing in videos like that of Mr. Rastani. His war indicator limit, right, is really quite telling of a personal bias. You could ascribe any of thousands of reasons to his war indicator limit to indicate when things may or may not have a reason to be more conflicting, right? More driven by conflict, right? You may or may not graph that subjectively or objectively. I personally believe there's no way to make that graph completely objectively, okay? Unless you are, not when you have his background, right? Like, no, there is no way. And again, nothing against Mr. Rastani. I have tremendous respect for his technical analysis skills and everything else. I just think in this political discussion, he is scapegoating not just Netanyahu, but Israel. And why do I say? And he's also, by the way, ignoring the crimes of regimes like Iraq and Iran. Right? In this same video, he goes on to talk at length about the failing of America to find WMDs in Iraq. Well, that is just not true. You can search Google, you can search the New York Times, you can search a whole bunch of places. You will see not only did America find WMDs in Iraq during the war and after the actions of the war had largely ended, they actually implemented a secret plan at the CIA called Operation Avarice, and you can easily Google that. Operation Avarice, like greed, in 2005 and 2006, where they bought, through intermediaries, leftover WMDs found in Iraq that had yet to be destroyed. And they did, in fact, buy and destroy them in Iraq. WMDs. So I'm sick and tired of people using the FUD of no WMDs being found in Iraq as a reason to scapegoat Israel yet again as a warmongering country trying to force America into yet another conflict without ever having had evidence of WMDs in Iraq. That is a lie. That is a bald-faced lie, okay? Now, in this case, he may have made a mistake. I will give Alessio Rastani the benefit of the doubt 100% that he just didn't know. But there are people in politics, and I don't assume Alessio is into politics. I assume he's into finance and economics because that's the great content he provides. But somebody clearly gave him information that he believes that Israel is a warmongering country, at least currently, while led by Prime Minister Netanyahu. That is an absolute lie, okay? No Israeli Prime Minister in history has been a warmonger. Why? Because it would be an absolutely foolish and suicidal thing to do, not only politically, okay, but as a nation. It is a tiny nation. There is no way Israel would ever seek to fight wars, okay? It is a tiny country. It is defending itself as best it can. It is existing with all of its ability, defending itself as best it can against nations that are on its borders that are way bigger than it, and nations beyond its borders that are much bigger than that, that are still technically at war with Israel, okay? Syria, on Israel's border, is technically still at war with Israel. Lebanon, right on Israel's border, is technically still at war with Israel, right? And the Palestinian Authority is technically not at peace with Israel. They are still fighting against Israel, right? And Hamas in Gaza is technically not at peace with Israel. Doesn't matter if there's a lull in violence. What does that mean? Oh, I see. So Canadians and Americans can occasionally just throw rockets at each other across the border, but from time to time there's an occasional lull in violence, so that's fine. Could you imagine that? Right? That's the state of affairs in Gaza and Israel. People are throwing projectiles across each other's borders. That's not a state of peace, but it certainly wouldn't be in the interest of Israel to want that to continue and be worse. So to say that Prime Minister Netanyahu is a warmonger is really just FUD. And when you hear it from a guy like Alessio, again, whose work I have tremendous respect for when it comes to economic analysis and projections, it is playing into the hands of the fearmongers, okay, of the anti-Semites, of the people who want the military and industrial complex to grow further. It is playing into the hands of corrupt politicians who want to do this, that, and the other thing about it. That is true. And again, I'm not defending Netanyahu. I think he has a lot to be criticized about. But to claim he is a warmonger, no. To say that he has interests in the military-industrial complex, yes, I'm sure. Sure. Every leader in Israel, unfortunately, has had too much of a relationship with the military-industrial complex outside of their job and role as prime minister. Right? Too many people in top government positions are in the revolving door, going in and out of the Israeli military-industrial complex, and also globally in the military-industrial complex in other countries. Too many. But that is the state of affairs in that little country. And to pretend that that is not the case would be denying the truth. But that said, that doesn't make the country a warmongering country. That makes certain cronies at the top people who are profiting from that. Okay? It does mean that there are certain people who don't have an interest in solving the problem long term. I've said that for decades. There are people who don't want to solve the problem, right? Who are right at the top. But it does not mean that Bibi Netanyahu himself is a fearmonger who is looking to start another war. He may very well be making money from the military-industrial complex. That does not mean he's looking to start another war. It just means he's looking to make more money in the military-industrial complex. Right? And again, while he's prime minister, I highly doubt he's doing that. Right? He's not like Trump. There's more transparency, a little more transparency required in Israel to be prime minister. But once he's not prime minister again, he can go right back into that. And meanwhile, certainly his family can certainly keep owning shares and whatever else. So, I personally do believe that the Israeli leaders, many of them, because it's proven, are shareholders in large companies in the military-industrial complex. That does not mean, again, the prime minister is a warmonger. Right? He's perfectly happy as long as the complex is still growing. As long as he's still making more money, what does he care? As long as he's still getting more political points, what does he care? Right? But that doesn't mean they're starting wars. There's a big difference between supporting an industry that can fight wars versus actually starting a war. There's a huge difference. Okay? And also, the fact is that, generally speaking, when your economy is doing relatively well, you don't look for reasons to start a war. And Netanyahu just won a fifth election. He doesn't have a reason to start one. He doesn't need to start a war. He just won a fifth election. Right? Starting a war now would just be silly. Because all too often in Israeli history, if you look at it, you'll see that after wars, it happens a lot. That there are elections shortly after wars, within a year or two. Why would he want another election? He just had one. He just won. He's in for another 4 years if he doesn't mess up, right? Doesn't make any sense. So again, How does this relate to crypto? It relates to crypto very simply. Okay. Using Israel as a scapegoat. Israel, which, by the way, is a leader in blockchain development, a leader in blockchain marketing, a leader in all kinds of things with cryptocurrencies. Using them as a scapegoat will tamp down the interest, will tamp down the positive feelings that are growing towards crypto, will tamp down this early crypto spring that's happening, right? And may prevent prices from going up further, which is complete. I mean, I don't believe the news alone will do that, but it could definitely influence some people who are thinking of investing in crypto. It could influence them to wait a while longer. And that, in general, is not great for marketing, because if some of those people are significant investors, or if we're talking about a large number of average retail investors being influenced, right? I don't think Mr. Rastani's video will influence a large number of retail investors, but you know, when shows like CNBC might start showing, it might start airing clips about this kind of thing, or might start suggesting things similar to that, to this kind of story. And it happens on all kinds of different news channels. I'm not pointing out CNBC in particular. But when you look at all of these things happening, right, in this news cycle, with the feelings and everything else that are going into crypto and all the marketing that's being made to promote crypto positively, and then you have heavy hitters, relatively, in the YouTube space, like Alessio coming out and saying all these negative things, that isn't good for crypto. I'm not suggesting he should be a cheerleader. His analysis is spot on, probably, like really, in terms of the technical analysis of will Bitcoin or crypto move sideways or up or down or whatever. But the reasons for the analysis, I think, are not only fundamentally flawed, they're very politically biased and politically charged. And if anything, they're the kind of FUD that create massive misunderstanding and even conflict. So, at a small level, I'm not suggesting his video is going to cause a real conflict. I don't believe that, right? But I do believe that the more you have these kind of drops in the ocean, right, eventually one drop of rain turns into a flash flood, and then all of a sudden, we're all drowning here, right? Stuck in the canyon. And that's, I think, the problem that I have with this particular message that was out there, and I had to mention something about it because I don't think it's right. I don't think it's fair to scapegoat anybody, to blame them, and to fearmonger and say this is the war that's coming and it's all because of the Jews and that Israeli prime minister. That's just crazy talk. You know? That's just crazy talk. To say that it's like that. Let's be proportional and realistic here. Who are the people who actually have started countless acts of terror around the world? Right? The Revolutionary Guard of Iran is a great candidate for that particular label. And to not recognize and to deny that, it's a propaganda that must not be allowed. Right? It cannot remain unanswered. So I felt I had to answer that. Again, full respect for Mr. Rastani on a technical analysis level and economic level. I've learned a lot from watching his videos. Absolutely have. He's tremendous. I think I recommend them, still do, to anybody who wants to learn about analysis, investments, and things like that. He gives some really great, wonderful video, information by video. But when it comes to this political issue, I really think he's off base. And I mean that, again, full respect. Everyone's free to their opinion. Anyway, you've heard mine now. I've gone on about it too long. I guess I'll end it here. So thanks again for watching, folks. And remember, you can always check out our YouTube channel and hit subscribe. Hit the old notification bell icon if you want to enjoy our videos as they come out. And of course, if you want to get any marketing services, feel free to visit our website, our marketing agency website, description below. And yeah, so until next time, folks, take care.